The Skyreach 4 Mini is the result of years of iteration after iteration, from the prototypes to the S3 Mini, then to the very popular S4 Mini. Today we're looking at a small form factor case which is pretty much uncontested when it comes to building both as small as possible whilst achieving a reasonable level of compromise for a gaming system. Coming in at just 5 liters in total volume, we're going to see just how the Skyreach 4 Mini stacks up against other tiny options like the Dan A4, comparing hardware compatibility, thermals, and of course, the compromises that you need to consider. So the Skyreach 4 Mini, in summary, is a slim, small form factor case that can accommodate a powerful gaming system in a tiny shell with a minimal design. On the outside, the design is very clean and nonsense free. No logos, no front USB or audio, just a hole for a power button on the front. By the way, the power button will need to be purchased separately. It's a completely aluminium construction that has a brushed finish that's pretty much identical to what you'll find on the Ncase M1 and the Dan A4. The reason for that is that all 3 of these cases are manufactured by Lee & Lee, so the quality here is pretty much as good as it gets. While the interior frame and the front bezel are an anodized black, the 2 silver side panels wrap around the top and bottom of the case, removing the need for additional panels and achieving a really pleasing, unique design. Now, the fact that this case is entirely aluminium isn't just for show. Of course, with the Skyreach 4 Mini being this small, portability is a massive selling point. The aluminium means that it's both very lightweight, making it very easy to travel around with, but at the same time, durability and the safety of your hardware on the inside isn't going to be an issue. Simply put, you can throw this thing in a backpack without worrying about it, but competitors like the Node 202, which use plastic, are going to have durability concerns over the long term. That's if you can get those larger cases in a backpack in the first place. There are plenty of cutouts on both sides of the case as well as the top and bottom, allowing the system to intake and exhaust air with very little restriction. The cutouts are actually a patented design called Sky Slots, where the spacing and size of the slots has supposedly been optimized. At the very least, they give the Skyreach 4 Mini an iconic look, which I definitely approve of. Alright, so let's open this guy up and take a look at the hardware layout. So it all starts with your ITX motherboard positioned at the top of the case, and since there's very little depth to the case, this makes it incredibly easy to install. It also means that the CPU cooler height and even the RAM height are limited to just 45mm. For a gaming focused system, I personally don't see this as an issue, and here we're using Noctua's NHL9 CPU cooler, as this seems to be the most recommended cooler for this case. Now for the GPU, and here's where the slight, but in my opinion, sensible compromises begin. The maximum length for your graphics card in the Skyreach 4 Mini is 215mm, so full-length cards are not supported, but you could probably have guessed that just by looking at the case. Currently, the most powerful card that you can jam in there is the Zotac 1080 Ti Mini. However, as far as I've seen in the S4 Mini community, this card is not really recommended due to the power supply limitations, but more on that in just a second. So what I recommend is a mini card from either MSI or Gigabyte. Both make an RTX 2070 under 175mm in length, meaning that it should fit with plenty of space to spare. The one that I'm using is MSI's Aero ITX card. I've done a full review on this one where I compared it to the Founders Edition RTX 2070, and I was thoroughly impressed. Now, the way that the GPU is actually connected to your motherboard is via this little guy right here, an ultra compact and flexible PCIe riser cable made specifically for this case. This allows the GPU and motherboard to be stacked vertically like shown, compared to the side-by-side or sandwich layout that you'll see in the Ghost S1 and the Dan A4. For storage, 2 2.5-inch drives can be mounted on the side bracket behind the graphics card, so storage is absolutely sufficient for a gaming system. There's also some surprisingly creative options for fan mounting as well. Instead of installing drives on the bracket, you can install 2 slim 92mm fans there, and they can be used instead of the fans on your graphics card by removing the shroud. You've also got a bracket for a slim 120mm fan that you can use for the same thing, or otherwise how you really mount it and where you put it is kind of up to you. There's also two 50mm fan positions at the front of the case, as well as a slot for a USB port. However, the front panel will need to be modded if you want to use those. Now the build is mostly complete, but you'll notice that we have skipped one thing here, and that is the power supply. And this is where the Skyreach 4 Mini gets a bit funky, but it's also what allows it to be so much smaller than its competitors. So there are a few different ways that you can set up your power supply for your ITX system inside the Skyreach 4 Mini, but the one that I'm going to be covering and testing today is with the tiny HDPlex 400 DC to DC unit combined with Dell's 330 watt AC to DC unit. So in summary, the 330 watt Dell power brick, which is used for some Alienware gaming systems, takes the power from the wall, then puts it straight into the DC input jack from the HDPlex 400, and then the HDPlex converts that into usable power for your system. The HDPlex 400 gives you a single 8-pin connector for your CPU, a 4-pin connector for your SATA drives, a 24-pin connector for your motherboard, and a single 8-pin connector for your graphics card, which splits into two separate 8-pin PCIe power cables. You'll also find a 6-pin connector for the DC input, and this is mounted nicely towards the bottom of the case. The HDPlex itself sits right behind the front panel, and although there's no mounting for it in the current version of the Skyreach 4 Mini, the rigidity of the wires do hold it in there quite well. I would recommend some double-sided tape though for those who do like things extra secure, as I did find it still had a bit of play without it. So with this configuration, we're rated for a little over 330 watts of power, but if your system requires a bit more than that, or maybe perhaps a bit less, I'd highly recommend checking out the YouTube channel Not From Concentrate. It's run by Josh, the actual creator of the S3, S4 and Skyreach Mini, and he's got a ton of content regarding different setups and configurations. If you're looking to build in this thing, definitely watch a few of his videos. Okay, now back to my build, and I wanted to first test the system with everything open and uninstalled, as I did expect the unexpected. So with everything plugged in and ready to go, it didn't boot. No post, no motherboard LEDs, no power to the system at all. After a few minutes of troubleshooting, I found that for some reason, the 330 watt Dell power supply was shutting off when being plugged into the system. I wasn't sure why this was, but I was able to work around it by simply plugging the external power brick into the system first, and then plugging the brick into the wall secondly for power. This meant that I was able to now power up the system and post with no issues at all, and it was time to properly assemble the build for testing. And with the build completely assembled, it really is insane how tiny this build actually is. Remember, we've got a 6-core CPU and an RTX 2070 in there. That configuration is no slouch when it comes to gaming. But the first thing I wanted to test was the stability of the system when it came to the power supply. Blender was fine on the i5-8400, with the entire system pulling just 105 watts from the wall, and with Heaven 4.0 we're pulling 223 watts. So we've still got a ton of headroom there, and believe it or not, I actually ran Heaven 4.0 and Blender on loop for over 30 minutes with no crashing whatsoever, and average power draw there was still well within check at 276 watts. So you probably could spec this system up to an undervolted 9700K if you can call it, but I feel most people will be pretty satisfied with the performance of the i5. Overall, the system was merely sipping power, and I had no restarts or trips because we were not even close to maxing out that external brick. On the note of thermals, everything was running cool as expected given how breathable the case is. With Core i7 or Ryzen 7 CPUs, you will need to tune the V-core on those processors to get them running cool on that Noctua cooler. For gaming use though, I'd totally recommend sticking with an i5. So after I was done with the brief testing, I just decided to kick back, play a couple rounds of Apex Legends. I guess you could call this some extended stability testing or something like that, but I honestly just really enjoyed the system overall and wanted to see what it was like to actually game on. I'm playing on a 1080p 144Hz screen here with all quality settings set to max, and I'm having no problem running Apex Legends above 120 FPS consistently. This build would be absolutely perfect for a tiny LAN rig. It literally fits in your backpack with the power brick and can tear through pretty much anything you throw at it at 1080p and even 1440p resolution. I mean, I probably don't need to convince you of the performance here when it's packing an RTX 2070. Noise levels were actually pretty quiet too. I gamed here without headphones and never felt like it was getting too loud. So I think the best way to wrap up this review is that I really wish I had an actual use case for a build like this. I don't go to LANs and I don't edit videos on the go, but the Skyreach 4 Mini made me wish that I did. In terms of compactness, it's pretty much uncontested, and it hits that sweet spot in my opinion where you just have enough cooling performance and power for a sensible high performance gaming rig. Pricing is currently at $199 US with more stock on the way coming in March, so keep your eyes peeled if you do want to get your hands on one. Now, if you do like the idea of slim, small form factor cases, but you don't want to spend that much money, and that's more than fine, Fractal Design's Node 202 is a great option at just $69 US. Just keep in mind that it's almost twice the amount of volume of the Skyreach 4 Mini at 10.2 liters, and build quality is not as great. Since it is bigger, you will need to consider the actual portability of the Node 202, as it actually won't fit in most sized backpacks. So guys, that pretty much wraps up my review of the Skyreach 4 Mini, and if you guys want to see any follow-up content or any different configurations tested with this case, don't forget to leave those in the comment section down below. Now, I know a lot of you guys are probably scratching your heads going, do you go for this? Do you go for the Dan A4 or NK71? There's so many options now in terms of like a premium small form factor case. And honestly, if you don't need the portability aspect of a small form factor case, then I would steer you towards those slightly larger options because they do offer water cooling support, allowing you to put in a higher performance CPU. So one of the reasons that I'm not going to move to this for my desktop editing and gaming rig is simply because I use an i7, an overclocked i7, and this little CPU cooler is not enough for that. That's okay because this system is optimized for portability, whereas, you try and put an NK71 in a backpack, it's not really going to go that well. And like I said, I really wish that I had an actual use case for this system because the case is pretty awesome. You can also find the links to this test system in the description down below, including the RTX graphics card that we used, the RTX 2070 from MSI. Otherwise guys, a huge thanks for watching. Consider subscribing down below if you haven't already, and I'll see you all in the next one.